Colonel Raymond Price had spent half his life walking into rooms where danger lingered like smoke. From Fallujah's burned-out streets to Kabul's narrow alleys, he had learned to recognize the silence before chaos. But nothing in his 26 years of service prepared him for the silence he walked into that evening inside his own garage. The overhead bulb flickered, throwing shadows across toolboxes and half-finished projects. His boots echoed against the concrete floor as he stepped inside, expecting the smell of motor oil and the sight of his daughter bent over her old Chevy pickup. Claire had always loved tinkering, disappearing for hours under the hood. But tonight, the sound of clinking metal came from the workbench, not the truck. He froze halfway through the doorway. Spread across the bench was an M24 sniper rifle, disassembled with surgical precision. Its long barrel gleamed under the weak light, every component laid out in perfect order: bolt, trigger assembly, scope mount, each piece aligned like a military inspection. And there she was, Claire, his 19-year-old daughter with quiet eyes and a love for books more than crowds, sat with sleeves rolled up, an oil rag in one hand and a cleaning rod in the other. She worked with steady, deliberate motions, her brow furrowed in. Concentration. The way she handled each part, the care in her movements. It wasn't the fumbling curiosity of a kid who stumbled across a weapon. It was the ritual of someone trained, someone comfortable with the responsibility of steel and gunpowder. Price's heart stumbled. He'd seen battle-hardened soldiers treat their rifles with less reverence. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. "Claire?" His voice cracked louder than he intended. She looked up slowly, not startled, not guilty. Her hazel eyes met his with a calm that unsettled him. She didn't drop the cleaning rod, didn't scramble to explain. She simply acknowledged him with a quiet nod, as if she had expected this confrontation eventually. The colonel's throat tightened. "Where?" he asked, his voice barely more than a growl. "Did you get that rifle?" The words carried the weight of every battlefield he had stood on, every soldier he had lost. He had seen insurgents with smuggled weapons, children with rifles too big for their arms. But never, never had he imagined asking that question in his own home, to his only child. Claire paused, running the rag gently along the rifle's barrel, her expression unreadable. "It was Grandpa's," she said finally, her voice soft, steady. The garage seemed to shrink around him. Grandpa, his father. Price blinked, memories flashing like mortar fire. His father had been a Vietnam vet, a man of few words, who carried scars on his body and in his silence. When he died, they'd gone. Through his things: uniforms, medals, a box of photos that smelled of mildew and cigarette smoke. But never, not once, had there been mention of an M24. "That's not possible," he muttered, stepping closer, eyes locked on the weapon. His pulse hammered in his ears. "Your grandfather never had a rifle like this." Maybe he didn't tell you everything," Claire interrupted, not with defiance, but with quiet certainty. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, sliding the bolt assembly across the table, checking for grit. She spoke like someone who had done this before, many times. Too many times. The colonel's mind raced. This wasn't some hunting rifle picked up at a pawn shop. This was a military sniper platform, customized, well-maintained, worth more than most families' cars. It didn't belong in a suburban garage. He felt the old soldier rise inside him, the one who demanded answers, who barked orders and expected obedience. His voice sharpened. "Who taught you how to do that?" Claire's gaze didn't waver. "Coach, from school. He runs the shooting club." The colonel stiffened. High school shooting clubs weren't unusual in Texas, but what she was doing this wasn't varsity marksmanship. Her grip, her confidence, the flawless disassembly, it screamed training far beyond after-school activities. Price's chest ached with a heavy clash of instincts. Fatherly fear, military suspicion, and a gnawing sense of betrayal. He studied her hands. The way they moved with an ease he recognized all too well. He'd seen it in seasoned snipers. Men who called their rifles extensions of themselves. This wasn't practice. This was precision. "Claire," he said, softer now, the commander slipping into father. "This isn't a toy. Do you understand what you're holding?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Better than you think." Her words cut deeper than a blade. The colonel stepped closer, shadows shifting across the rifle's steel. He searched her face for signs, fear, nerves, even guilt, but found none. Only calm determination. The quiet girl who used to curl up with novels on the couch, who once cried when a bird fell from its nest, was now cleaning a sniper rifle with the patience of a monk. Something was wrong. Something bigger than what she was admitting. He exhaled, feeling the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. "Claire, why?" For the first time, she looked away, eyes falling back to the gleaming rifle. She didn't answer. Instead, she continued her work, sliding pieces together with the unhurried rhythm of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The colonel realized, with a chill that reached his bones, that the rifle wasn't the only question. The real question was, what was his daughter preparing for? The colonel's boots were heavy against the concrete floor as he paced the garage, circling the workbench like a predator, uncertain whether to attack or retreat. His eyes kept flicking between the rifle and his daughter, torn between disbelief and a rising, burning need for answers. "Grandpa's," Claire had said, as if the word explained everything. It didn't. His father, James Price, had been many things. A soldier, a survivor, a distant man who carried the war home in silence. But in all his years growing up, in all the father-son moments, or the absence of them, Raymond had never seen, never even heard of, this rifle. The M24 wasn't just a relic. It was a weapon tied to ghosts. "Grandpa never owned that," Price said again, sharper this time, as if volume could force reality to bend. His voice bounced off the garage walls. Claire calmly slid the bolt forward, checking the fit. Her hands were steady. Too steady. "You didn't know everything about him." The colonel's jaw clenched. "Don't you start with me?" "I knew my father better than—" He stopped. That wasn't true. And they both knew it. His father had been a vault, a man who locked away his memories behind a tight jaw and eyes that never looked too long at family photos. Price dragged it, hand across his face. The smell of gun oil and solvent clung to the air. It brought back memories of barracks, of nights spent stripping down rifles under fluorescent lights. Seeing his daughter sitting there, repeating the same rituals, twisted his stomach. "How long have you had this?" he asked, voice lower now, heavy with warning. Claire hesitated, then set the rag down. "A while." "A while?" His voice hardened. "You mean weeks? Months? How long have you been hiding a military rifle?" "In my garage, Claire?" She finally met his gaze. "Since the summer." The words landed like a punch. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. Father replacing officer again. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes flickered with something fear. "No, not fear. Resignation. Because I knew you'd react like this." Price felt the blood surge in his temples. "Like this? Claire, I'm trying to protect you. That rifle isn't just dangerous. It's illegal in civilian hands. Do you understand the kind of trouble this could bring down on us?" "I understand perfectly," she said, calmly. "Better than you think." The confidence in her voice unnerved him more than the rifle itself. It wasn't teenage rebellion. It wasn't ignorance. It was something else, something deeper. "Who taught you?" he demanded. She didn't answer at first. Her fingers traced the barrel, like one might trace the spine of a book. Finally, she whispered, "Coach." Price's eyes narrowed. "Coach? You mean your shooting club advisor?" Claire nodded. His stomach twisted. School shooting clubs were one thing, pellet rifles. .22s, maybe a hunting rifle, if the district turned a blind eye. But this? The M24 wasn't a weekend blinker. It was a precision sniper platform, used by Army and Marine marksmen, effective well beyond 1,000 yards. No high school coach would have introduced her to this. Not legally, not safely. Price's instincts screamed, "That's not a school activity." "Where exactly did this coach of yours teach you to handle military hardware?" She stayed quiet, eyes locked on the gun. "Answer me." His voice cracked, harsher than intended. He saw her flinch, not from fear, but from disappointment, as if she'd expected him to explode and was already tired of it. "Dad," she said, finally breaking the silence, "I'm not a child. Stop treating me like one." "You are my child," he shot back. The garage swallowed his roar, leaving a hollow echo. His throat burned, not from anger, but from the ache of realizing how far away she suddenly seemed. "You're 19. That rifle doesn't belong in your hands. You have no idea what it means to carry something like that." Her voice dropped, quiet but sharp as glass. "You're wrong. I know exactly what it means." The colonel's breath caught. He studied her, searching for cracks in her composure, for some hint that she didn't believe what she was saying. But she sat steady, her posture calm, her hands folded over the rifle, as if guarding a sacred text. It rattled him, how much she resembled his father in that moment, firm, unreadable, anchored by conviction no argument could shake. Price turned away, running both hands through his graying hair. He felt trapped, like the garage walls were closing in. "Claire, you can't keep this. It's not safe. It's not legal. Whatever this coach has been telling you, whatever you think Grandpa wanted, you don't know the whole story." "Neither do you," she said softly. Her words struck deep, because she was right. There had always been holes in his father's past. Missions unspoken, scars unexplained. The colonel had never pressed, out of respect or maybe fear. But now those gaps loomed wide, swallowing certainty. He turned back, trying to regain ground. Even if it was his, even if somehow this rifle slipped through the cracks of history, you can't just keep it like a family heirloom. It doesn't belong in your hands. Her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, though it wasn't warm. Maybe it does. The colonel's breath stalled. The confidence in her voice wasn't arrogance. It was conviction. He wanted to argue, to command, to strip the weapon from her hands and lock it away. But something in her eyes stopped him, something that reminded him of soldiers he had served with, men who carried burdens silently, because they knew no one else could. The silence stretched, thick with things neither could say. Finally, Claire rose from her stool, holding the rifle with careful ease. She placed it gently back into its case, snapping the latches shut with deliberate clicks. Then she looked at him, not with defiance, but with a steady calm that chilled him more than rebellion ever could. "Dad," she said, her voice level, "I didn't ask for this, but it found me, and I'm not giving it up." He opened his mouth to argue, to order, to beg, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, the colonel felt powerless. Colonel Raymond Price didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in his darkened bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan as it churned slow circles in the stale Texas air. His wife, Ellen, shifted beside him, her breathing soft and steady, lost in dreams. But Raymond's mind was anything but quiet. The image replayed in his head endlessly, Claire at the workbench, hands steady, eyes calm. dismantling the M24 like it was an extension of her body. He had seen men in combat who couldn't manage that level of composure. He thought back to his father. James Price had been a shadow more than a presence in his life. Raymond's childhood was filled with the smell of cigarette smoke, the sound of clinking ice in glasses, and long silences at the dinner table. His father's voice had been low, gravelly, with a tone that discouraged questions. Raymond had never asked about Vietnam. He had been too young to understand, too scared to pry when he was older. And then one day, it was too late. The old man was gone, leaving behind only fragments, a few medals, uniforms, a faded purple heart tucked inside a box that smelled of mothballs. Never a rifle, never a story. Now, Claire was claiming otherwise. By dawn, the colonel was pacing the kitchen, a mug of coffee clutched in his hand, staring through the blinds at the orange glow creeping over the horizon. He couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion clawing at him. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe he didn't know everything. The thought made him restless. He needed proof. When Ellen emerged in her robe, squinting against the light, she found him already. Dressed, boots laced, jacket on. "You're heading out?" she asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "I need to check something," he said. "Ray," she sighed, recognizing the storm brewing in him. "Don't push her too hard. She's not a soldier. She's your daughter." He kissed her cheek, but didn't answer. The attic smelled of dust and neglect. Sunlight streamed through a narrow window, catching on floating particles that danced like lazy fireflies. The colonel dragged out the old storage trunk he hadn't opened in years. His father's trunk. He remembered the last time he'd touched it after the funeral, when Ellen urged him to go through his father's things. He hadn't been able to. The grief was mixed with resentment, and the trunk became just another box shoved into the corners of memory. Now, with shaking hands, he flipped the latches. Inside lay neatly folded uniforms, their colors faded, ribbons frayed. A leather wallet with an old ID. A pair of boots, cracked and worn, soles nearly smooth from miles of jungle and mud. He sifted through them, feeling like an intruder in someone else's life. At the bottom, under a layer of yellowed newspapers, he found something he'd never seen before. A manila folder, edges curled with age. He opened it slowly. Discharge papers, stamped with words that froze him in place. Special operations, long-range reconnaissance patrol. He frowned, scanning the details. His father hadn't been just another infantryman. He had been part of something far more dangerous, far more secretive. Tucked inside the folder was a photograph. The colonel held it up to the weak light. His breath caught. His father young, lean, eyes hard stood in jungle fatigues, a rifle slung casually across his shoulder. Not just any rifle. The same M24 Claire had been cleaning the night before. Price's grip tightened around the photo. It wasn't possible. The M24 hadn't even been standard issue during Vietnam. The Army hadn't officially adopted it until the late 80s. Yet here it was, in a black and white photo, unmistakable in his father's hands. His mind spun. Had his father been part of some early prototype program? Had he stolen it, smuggled it home? Or was the photo something else entirely proof of a story that had been buried with him? For the first time, Raymond felt he didn't just not know his father. He might never have known him at all. When he returned home, Claire was in the backyard, sitting cross-legged in the grass with a rifle case beside her. She looked peaceful, like she belonged there, sunlight catching the strands of her hair. He held the photo in his hand, unsure how to begin. "Claire," he called, voice softer than the night before. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the glare. He walked over, crouched down, and held out the photograph. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Her eyes flickered as she studied the image. There was no surprise on her face, no shock, just a quiet acknowledgement. "I found it months ago," she admitted, "along with the rifle. He hid them in the crawl space under the old shed." The colonel's stomach turned. "How long have you been shooting?" he asked. "Since summer." Her answer was too simple, too clean. He pressed. "Who taught you? Really? Don't give me half-truths, Claire." "Not now." She hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Coach helped me with basics, but the rest, it's like my hands already knew what to do." The colonel's chest tightened. "That's not possible, isn't it?" she asked quietly. "You said he was special operations. Maybe. Maybe it's in me." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He wanted to laugh it off, dismiss it as teenage melodrama. But the precision he'd seen in her movements, the calm way she'd handled the rifle, there had been nothing childish about it. "Claire," he struggled to find words. "Guns aren't destiny. You don't inherit muscle memory." "Then how do you explain this?" she challenged, pointing at the photo and at herself. "I don't practice like other kids. I don't study manuals. I just know, like it was waiting for me." The colonel shook his head, but the denial felt hollow. He had buried men who froze under fire. He had buried others who seemed born for it, natural killers in uniform. He had always believed skill came from training, discipline, repetition. But watching Claire, he wasn't so sure anymore. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't bragging. She was simply stating a truth she believed with every fiber of her being. And that terrified him more than anything. That night, after Claire had gone to bed, Price sat alone in the garage. The M24 rested on the bench, locked in its case. He traced the edges of the latches with his fingers, haunted by the thought of opening it. The rifle wasn't just metal and wood. It was a key to secrets his father had taken to the grave, a key to something awakening inside his daughter. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the same brand his father used to drink, and stared at the case until his eyes blurred. For the first time in his life, the colonel felt like he wasn't the soldier in control. He was the bystander, watching history repeat itself in ways he didn't understand. And deep down, he feared it wasn't just history repeating. It was destiny unfolding. The sign read Lone Star Rifle and Pistol Club, its letters faded by decades of Texas sun. The range sat on the edge of town, little more than a gravel lot, a cinder block office, and long stretches of dry, cracked earth dotted with targets. Claire parked her old Chevy, slung the hard case over her shoulder, and walked toward the firing line. To anyone watching, she looked like any teenager chasing a hobby. But inside, her heart drummed with a rhythm she couldn't quite explain. Every step felt purposeful, as though she were retracing a path already laid out for her. The range officer, a burly ex-Marine named Hank Walters, recognized her immediately. He'd seen her here before, quiet and focused, never part of the rowdy crowd of young shooters who came to plink at soda cans. Claire never wasted bullets. She always asked for the longest lanes, the farthest targets. "You again," Hank called, squinting beneath his ball cap. His tone carried amusement, but also a hint of curiosity. "You planning to embarrass my regulars?" "Today?" Claire smiled faintly. "Just practicing," he snorted. "Practicing my ass. You shoot cleaner than half the vets who come through here." Claire didn't answer. She walked to her lane, set the case on the bench, and unlatched it with deliberate clicks. The moment she lifted the M24 free, Hank's brows shot up. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered, stepping closer. "Where the hell do you get that beauty?" Claire ignored the question. She laid out her gear with a precision that would have impressed any armorer, sandbags positioned, scope adjusted, wind meter set. Her motions carried the calm certainty of ritual. Hank watched, curiosity turning to something sharper. "You know what you're doing?" he asked. She slid around into the chamber and locked the bolt. Yes, the crack of the first shot split the morning air. The recoil nudged her shoulder, but she absorbed it like water meeting stone. Through the scope, the distant steel plate shuddered. Bullseye. Hank raised his binoculars, blinked, and swore under his breath. 800 yards, first shot. He lowered the glasses, shaking his head. "That's not luck." Claire didn't respond. She cycled the bolt, exhaled, fired again. Another bullseye. Then another. Within minutes, the plate at the farthest. Range was pocked with tight clusters, each shot within an inch of the last. By the time she stopped, sweat glistened on her forehead, but her breathing remained even, controlled. She sat back, lowering the rifle gently, like she was tucking it. To sleep. Hank walked over, whistling low. "Kid, I've seen Marines miss those shots with 10 years of training. Where'd you learn that?" Claire wiped her brow with her sleeve. "Nowhere." "Don't play games with me," he said. His tone carried the edge of a man who had smelled combat, who knew the difference between skill and miracles. Nobody shoots like that cold. Not unless they're trained or born with something the rest of us don't have. Claire finally looked at him, eyes steady. Maybe it's both. Her words hung in the air, heavier than the Texas heat. Back home, Colonel Price stood at the kitchen sink, watching the clock. Claire had been gone since morning. He knew where she'd gone. He wasn't blind. Ellen leaned against the counter, sipping coffee, reading his silence like an open book. "She's at the range again, isn't she?" Ellen asked softly. He grunted. "You can't chain her to the house," she continued. "You tried that. With deployments. Didn't work then. Won't work now." He slammed his glass down harder than he meant to. "This is different, Ellen. She's not just shooting targets. She's good. Too good. It's not normal." His wife studied him carefully. "And that scares you?" "Yes," he admitted, surprising even himself with the rawness of it. "Because I've seen what happens to people who are that good. The army eats them alive. And she," his voice broke. He steadied himself. "She's my daughter." "Not." "A soldier." Ellen reached out, resting a hand on his arm. "Maybe she's both." Price stared at her, searching for an argument, but found none. Later that afternoon, Claire returned, rifle case slung over her shoulder. The colonel was waiting in the garage, arms crossed. "How far today?" he asked, his tone clipped. Claire paused, studying him. 800. He shook his head, a mix of awe and dread in his eyes. "That's not practice anymore. That's performance." She set the case down, unflinching. "It's not about performance. It's about preparation." "Preparation for what?" he demanded. Claire met his stare, unwavering. "Whatever's coming." Her words chilled him. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, with the same calm certainty his soldiers once carried into missions they weren't sure they'd return from. That night, Colonel Price couldn't shake the image of Claire at the range. He pored over the photograph of his father again, tracing the outline of the rifle. The more he studied it, the more questions gnawed at him. How had his father acquired the weapon? Why had he hidden it? And why did Claire, of all people, find it now? He stared at the photo until his eyes blurred, whiskey glass sweating in his hand. He thought of his father's silence, of Claire's sudden skill, and of the uncanny way history seemed to repeat itself. The old soldier inside him whispered the truth he didn't want to admit. Claire wasn't practicing for sport. She was awakening something written in blood and silence. And, once awakened, it couldn't be put back to sleep. The storm broke on a Tuesday evening. The colonel had spent the day pacing the house, his nerves fraying tighter with every tick of the clock. Claire had skipped dinner, retreating to the garage again, her footsteps soft but her presence heavy, pressing against him from across the hall. Finally, he couldn't take it. He marched to the garage, threw open the door, and froze. There she was again, his daughter, sleeves rolled, eyes focused, rifle cradled in her lap like it was part of her. The sight no longer shocked him, but it didn't sting any less. The smell of gun oil hit him like shrapnel, dragging him back to desert nights under humming generators, rifles laid across knees, men cleaning weapons to keep their hands from shaking. Enough, his voice thundered through the garage. Claire blinked but didn't flinch. She looked up calmly, almost serenely. What's enough? You know damn well what I mean. He stepped forward, his boots striking the concrete hard. This. He jabbed a finger toward the rifle. The shooting, the training. Acting like you're preparing for a war that isn't coming. She placed the rag down slowly, her movements controlled. It's not acting. He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. Claire, listen to me. Rifles don't belong in high school garages. They don't belong in your hands. Not like this. Her lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile. You've carried them half your life. His jaw clenched. I carried them because I had to, because I swore an oath, and because men were trying to kill me and mine. That's not your world. Her eyes didn't waver. Maybe it will be. The colonel's chest tightened. He wanted to shake her, to break through whatever spell had taken root in her. But she sat steady, too steady, and that steadiness terrified him more than anger ever could. You don't understand, he said, softer now, voice rough. You're 19. You've never seen what a bullet does to a body. You've never smelled cordite in the air after a firefight, never dragged a buddy bleeding out into the dust. You don't know the cost, Claire. War isn't glory. It's ruin. Her gaze held his, unflinching. And you don't understand either. I'm not chasing glory. I'm not pretending it's a game. This feels right. Like it's what I was meant to do. The colonel's throat tightened, his voice raw. Don't you dare say that. Don't. You ever romanticize this? I'm not, she said evenly. You think I don't know what death looks like? I've seen it in your eyes my whole life, Dad. I've seen the way you stare at walls when you think no one's watching. I've seen you drink at midnight and cry into your hands. Don't tell me I don't understand. The words cut deeper than any bullet could. For a moment, the colonel's composure cracked. His shoulders sagged. His daughter's voice, so calm, so matter-of-fact, exposed the very wounds he tried to bury. He turned away, gripping the workbench hard enough that his knuckles went white. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint hum of the bulb overhead. Finally, he found his voice again. I don't want this life for you. Claire's reply was immediate. It's not your choice. His head snapped back toward her. The quiet girl who used to curl up with books, who once clung to his hand crossing the street, now sat across from him with eyes like stone. She wasn't asking permission. She was declaring something larger than both of them. Claire, he tried again, softer, almost pleading. You're too young to carry this, to shoulder this kind of weight. Her expression softened just a fraction, but her voice stayed firm. Maybe I'm the one who understands what it demands. You carried it because you had to. I'll carry it because I choose to. The words sank deep, and for the first time, Colonel Price felt the last bit of control slipping away. He had led men through battles, issued commands that were obeyed without question. But here, with his daughter, his authority was powerless. He could order, beg, forbid, but none of it mattered, because she had already decided. Later, that night, Ellen found him sitting alone at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of him. "She won't listen to me," he admitted, voice low, broken. "She's not supposed to," Ellen said gently. "She's growing into herself. She's walking into fire," he snapped. "And I can't stop her." Ellen placed her hand on his. "You can't stop the tide, Ray. You can only guide it." But guiding felt impossible. He had spent his life teaching soldiers how to survive war. Now his own daughter was volunteering to step into its shadow. The next morning, he tried again. He waited in the driveway as Claire loaded her truck for another day at the range. The rifle case slid into the back seat like it belonged there. "Claire," he said, his voice steady but firm. "If you walk away now, if you put that rifle down, you can still choose another path. College, travel, a life that doesn't end with you staring down a scope." She paused, looking at him with quiet sadness. "I don't want to walk away. I don't want easy. I want to be ready." "Ready for what?" he pressed. Her answer was quiet, chilling in its simplicity. "For whatever calls me." He stared at her, searching for words, but found none. As she climbed into the truck and drove off, the colonel stood rooted in place, the morning sun casting a long shadow behind him. For the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't the protector anymore. He was the bystander, watching his daughter step into a destiny she believed was hers, and powerless to drag her back. The news spread faster than Claire ever realized. At first, it was just a murmur among the regulars at the Lone Star Rifle and Pistol Club, old-timers nudging each other, veterans shaking their heads in disbelief. The girl who could stack shots. At 800 yards, like she was threading a needle, everybody was talking about her now. "Kid's a natural," Hank Walters muttered to a fellow Marine vet one Saturday morning. "I seen snipers miss shots she makes look like nothing." The other man only whistled low. "What's her story?" Hank shrugged, but his eyes narrowed. "That's the thing. Feels like she don't have one. She just showed up." Colonel Price noticed the shift almost immediately. It began when neighbors started mentioning her casually, in that small-town way where news slips through fences and across porches. "Your girl's quite the shooter," Mr. Johnson from next door said with a chuckle, leaning on his rake one afternoon. Hank was bragging on her just the other day. The colonel forced a tight smile, muttering something about hobbies. But inside, his stomach twisted. He knew how gossip traveled. He knew how easily it could draw attention from the wrong ears. That night, at the kitchen table, he warned Claire. "You're standing out," he said flatly. She looked up from her notebook. "So?" "So," he snapped. "Standing out gets you noticed. Not always by the kind of people you want." Her brows furrowed, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to make headlines. I'm just training. Training where people can see," he shot back. "You think nobody's paying attention? You think word won't spread past this town?" Her silence was answer enough. He leaned closer, voice low and firm. "You don't understand the kind of eyes that might be watching. Recruiters, agencies, worse. Once you're on their radar, you don't get off." For a moment, Claire's comb cracked. Something flickered in her expression, a mix of curiosity and defiance. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," she said quietly. The colonel's heart dropped. By the next week, the whispers had reached beyond the range. A man in a pressed polo shirt showed up one afternoon, standing back from the firing line, observing. He didn't introduce himself, didn't shoot, just watched through mirrored sunglasses. Hank noticed him, muttered under his breath, but said nothing. Claire ignored the man completely, though she could feel his stare following every shot. When she packed up, he finally approached. "Impressive work," he said casually, his voice smooth, practiced. Not many can group like that your age. Claire offered only a polite nod. Thanks. Ever thought about competing? He asked. There are scholarships, programs, even Olympic tracks for talent like yours. She studied him for a moment, then shook her head. Not interested. He smiled faintly, but there was something behind his grin that made her skin prickle. That's a shame. Talent like that shouldn't go to waste. He handed her a card. She didn't take it. When she drove off, he watched her taillights fade, his expression unreadable. That evening, she mentioned the encounter at dinner. Almost offhand. The colonel froze mid-bite, fork clattering against his plate. What did you just say? Some guy at the range, she repeated. He said I should think about competing. Tried to give me a card. His blood ran cold. What kind of guy? She shrugged. I don't know. Early 40s. Sunglasses. Too clean. He cursed under his breath and shoved his chair back, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Dad? Claire asked, her tone cautious. He turned to her, eyes sharp. Listen to me. If anyone approaches you again, anyone, you walk away. No names, no cards, no conversation. Do you understand? She tilted her head, watching him carefully. Why? You know him? I don't need to know him, the colonel growled. I know the type. They see something they want, they sink their claws in, and they don't let go. Don't you see? You're being scouted. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't look alarmed. If anything, she looked intrigued. The colonel spent that night sitting in the dark, rifle photos spread across the table. His father's face stared back at him, calm and silent as always. You knew, didn't you? He muttered bitterly. You knew this would come back around. The weight of it settled on him, his father's secrets, his daughter's precision, the endless cycle pulling them all towards something inevitable. He poured another glass of whiskey, but it didn't steady him. Nothing could. Meanwhile, Claire's confidence grew. She began stretching the limits of the range, pushing Hank for longer distances, smaller targets. She experimented with wind shifts, shooting at dusk when the mirage played tricks. Her notebooks filled with calculations, patterns, even sketches of terrain she imagined herself moving through. One evening, Hank approached her quietly after a session. You ever think about what you're going to do with all this? He asked. She wiped down the rifle, not looking up. No, just feels like I should be ready. Ready for what? She finally met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Something bigger than this. Hank studied her, then nodded slowly. Just remember, kid, the world's always hungry for shooters. You best figure out whether you're feeding it or fighting it. His words lingered with her long after she drove home. At the Price household, the tension reached a breaking point. You don't get it, Dad, Claire said one night, her voice sharper than usual. I can't just stop. This isn't a hobby. It's who I am. The colonel slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing through the house. It's who they'll use you to be. You think they'll care about you? No. You're a trigger finger to them. A tool. And when they're done, they'll throw you away. She didn't flinch. Her eyes burned steady into his. Then maybe. I'd rather be a tool with purpose than nothing at all. The colonel's breath caught. For the first time, he saw not just defiance but destiny written across her face. And it terrified him. Because deep down, he knew she wasn't chasing war. War was chasing her. The first knock came just past midnight. Colonel Price was in the living room, dozing in his recliner, when the sharp rapping jolted him awake. He blinked, heart hammering, instinctively reaching for the pistol he still kept tucked in the end table. Old habits never died. They just waited for moments like this. The knock came again, firm, deliberate, unhurried. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing. Ray, Ellen's voice whispered from the hallway, groggy and nervous. Who? Is it? He raised a hand, signaling her to stay back. His gut told him this wasn't a neighbor dropping by with an emergency. This was something else. He crept to the door, pressed his eye to the peephole, and felt his blood run cold. Two men stood on the porch, both dressed in civilian clothes that screamed federal issue. Crisp slacks, clean jackets, haircuts that hadn't been done at a strip mall barbershop. One held a slim folder tucked under his arm. Both carried themselves with the kind of posture Price had seen 1,000 times overseas. They weren't salesmen. They weren't locals. They were here for Claire. He didn't open the door. Colonel Price? The taller one called, his voice calm, professional. We'd like a word. Price stayed silent. The man continued, as if reading from a script. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to discuss your daughter's abilities. The words sliced through him. Abilities. Not hobby, not interest. They already knew too much. He barked through the door. My daughter doesn't concern you. There was a pause. Then the shorter agent spoke, voice colder. On the contrary, Colonel, your daughter concerns a great many people. Price's hand tightened on the pistol. Leave, he growled. Now, for a moment, silence reigned. Then the taller man sighed, almost regretful. Have it your way. Their footsteps retreated, crunching across the gravel. The colonel watched until their sedan's headlights disappeared down the road, then double-locked the door, every nerve on fire. The next morning, Claire found him at the kitchen table, dark circles under his eyes, the pistol still sitting beside his coffee mug. What happened? She asked quietly. He stared at her, torn between warning her and locking her away. Finally, he spoke. They came. Her brows furrowed. Who? Men who don't knock unless they already know everything, he said. Bitterly. Government types. They wanted to talk about you? Her eyes widened just slightly, but instead of fear, something else glimmered there, something dangerous. What did you tell them? I told them to get the hell off my porch. She looked at him, almost studying him. And if they come back? They will, he admitted, his voice tight. They don't walk away, not when they think they've found someone useful. For the first time, Claire looked unsettled. She lowered herself into the chair across from him, hands folded around her coffee mug. So what now? Price's jaw clenched. Now you stop. No more range. No more practicing. You disappear, Claire. That's the only way this ends. Her lips parted, ready to argue, but she saw the fear etched deep in her father's face. The fear of a man who'd seen exactly what happened when the machine swallowed people whole. But Claire couldn't bring herself to agree. That afternoon, Price drove into town under the pretense of running errands. In reality, he went straight to Hank Walters. The old Marine was leaning against the counter of the range office, sipping. Bad coffee. He looked up as Price stormed in. Ray, Hank said cautiously, you look like you saw a ghost. Not a ghost, Price muttered. Worse. Feds. Hank set his cup down slowly. They sniffing around Claire? Price nodded. Hank cursed under his breath. I figured as much. Word's been out for weeks. Hell, some of my boys can't stop talking about her. Tightest shot groups I've seen since the course. Price slammed a hand against the counter. She's not a soldier. She's a kid. I won't let them take her. Hank studied him carefully. Ray, you and I both know they don't ask permission. If they want her, they'll find a way. Price's stomach twisted. Then I'll make damn sure they don't. Back home, Claire sat in the garage, staring at the rifle case. Her father's warning echoed in her head, but so did Hank's words from the week before. The world's always hungry for shooters. You best figure out whether you're feeding it or fighting it. She opened the case slowly, running her fingers along the steel. She didn't know if this weapon was a blessing or a curse, but she knew one thing. Putting it away wouldn't stop whatever was coming. If anything, it would just leave her unprepared. And being unprepared was worse than being used. That night, the colonel pulled an old lockbox from the attic. Dust caked the lid, the metal pitted with age. Inside lay a stack of papers, yellowed with time, his father's records. He spread them across the desk, searching for answers. Military orders, commendations, transfer reports. All routine on the surface, but certain lines jumped out. Assignments. Blacked out, locations redacted, references to special evaluations. Then he found it an evaluation report, stamped classified. Subject demonstrates innate marksmanship beyond measurable scale. Recommend immediate placement under Special Projects Division. His chest tightened. Special projects. He'd heard rumors of those units back in his own career clandestine programs. Experimental teams, soldiers trained not just for missions, but for things the public would never understand. He read further, heart pounding. Genetic predisposition suspected. Observed in lineal descendants. He froze. Lineal descendants. The word struck like a bullet. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't random. Claire's precision wasn't just talented. Was inheritance. And if the government knew, they wouldn't stop. The next morning, Colonel Price confronted his daughter with the file in hand. "Claire," he said, voice hard, "this isn't just skill. It's blood. It's legacy. My father, your grandfather, he was part of something dark. And they think you're next." She took the file, scanning the faded words, her face unreadable. When she finally looked up, her voice was steady. "Then maybe I'm next." Price felt the floor drop beneath him. "Don't say that." "Why not?" she asked quietly. "Maybe this is who I'm supposed to be." He slammed the file shut. "No, that's what they want you to believe. You think you're choosing, but you're not. You're walking into their trap." Claire's eyes burned with quiet fire. "And if it's not a trap, what if it's the truth?" Their stares locked. Father and daughter divided by a legacy neither had chosen, bound to a destiny neither could escape. That night, the knock came again. This time, it wasn't at the front door. It was at Claire's window. She froze in her bed, heart pounding, as a shadow loomed against the glass. A voice whispered, low and urgent, "Claire, we need to talk." The night was heavy, suffocating, every shadow in the Price household, amplified by the wind that rattled the windows. Claire sat on her bed, heart hammering, staring at the faint outline of the man outside her window. His presence was calm, but commanding, the kind that made grown men hesitate. She didn't move. Colonel Price had come into her room silently, his eyes dark with fear and anger. "Claire," he whispered, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Don't answer. Don't speak to them." She shook her head slightly. "I have to. I need to. Know who they are and why they're here." He clenched his fists. "They don't care about your questions. They care about control. That's all." The figure outside shifted slightly, pulling back just enough to remain unseen. The faint moonlight glinted off the edge of a badge clipped to his belt. FBI? Military intelligence? She couldn't tell, and the uncertainty made her skin crawl. "Claire," her father pressed again, "listen to me. Whatever they offer, whatever they promise, it's a lie. You've seen this kind of manipulation before. I've lived it. Don't step into their trap." She pulled her shoulder away gently, staring at him with the calm intensity that had haunted his nights for weeks. "You've spent your life protecting me from things I don't understand, Dad. I get it. But I can't hide behind you forever. Not when this feels like who I am." Price's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to beg, to drag her down into safety, but he could see the resolve etched into every line of her face. For the first time, he realized that the child he'd raised, the daughter who once hid behind his leg, was gone. She was someone else now, trained, focused, and terrifyingly capable. "Then I'll fight with you," he said finally, his voice raw. "But only on our terms." Claire nodded, and together they approached the window. The figure outside remained, still waiting. When Claire opened it slightly, a controlled calm radiated from him. He didn't step in. "Claire Price," he said smoothly. "We've been watching you for some time. Your precision, your training, it's beyond anything we've seen in someone your age. You've inherited skills from your grandfather, a man of remarkable service. We'd like to offer you an opportunity." Price's jaw tightened. Opportunity? That's a word grown-ups use when they're about to take something they shouldn't. The man's eyes flicked to him, measuring, calculating. "Colonel Price, you know as well as I do that exceptional talent cannot be ignored. Your daughter has a rare gift, and we only want to ensure it is used responsibly." Claire studied the man. "And if I say no?" His expression didn't change. "Then you refuse at your own risk. But you'd also be refusing a path that could define your life." Price's heart pounded. This was exactly what he feared. Claire was being offered the world or a cage disguised as purpose. She stepped back from the window. "I'll think about it." The man's eyes narrowed for a moment. Then he nodded. "You have until sunrise. We'll leave our contact." He pressed a small card into the window ledge and retreated into the shadows, disappearing like smoke. The dawn crept over the horizon, spilling pale light into the Price home. Claire sat at the kitchen table, the card before her, untouched. Her father joined her silently, both of them aware that the world had shifted overnight. "You don't have to decide today," Price said. "Carefully, I won't force you. But understand this. Once you step down their path, there's no turning back." Claire picked up the card, examining the printed number and the emblem faintly embossed in black. Her fingers traced the edge. "I know," she said quietly. "You understand what's at stake?" He asked, voice breaking slightly. "Yes," she whispered, "and I'm not afraid." Price closed his eyes for a long moment, feeling both pride and terror. "You don't have to be afraid alone," he said. "I'll face it with you. Just promise me you'll be careful." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "I promise." That evening she returned to the garage, the M24 resting on the workbench as if it waited for her. Price watched silently as she cleaned and prepared the rifle, each motion precise, meditative, almost ritualistic. He recognized the same calm discipline in her that he had seen in his father decades ago. "You've always had this," he said softly. "It was in you the moment you held a gun." She looked up, eyes steady. "Maybe, or maybe it's in. All of us passed down. But now it's my choice how to use it." He nodded, knowing she spoke truth. The line between heritage and destiny had blurred, and the choice was hers. A quiet settled over the garage, heavy but not oppressive. Father and daughter both knew the road ahead was dangerous, unpredictable. But for now, in this fragile calm, there was understanding. Claire's phone buzzed. She picked it up and saw a message from the number on the card. "We'll be in touch at the appointed time." She glanced at her father. "They're serious." "I know," Price replied, "and so are you." She closed the case, the M24 resting inside like a silent companion. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "I decide tomorrow." The colonel exhaled slowly. He didn't like the road ahead, but he knew one thing. She had inherited not just a rifle, but the courage to wield it. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The night stretched into dawn, shadows fading from the garage, the house, quiet except for the steady hum of the morning breeze. Outside, the world waited. Opportunities, threats, and secrets that had slumbered for decades now stirred awake. And Claire, the girl who had once hidden behind books and quiet determination, was no longer just a child. She was a legacy in motion, a living testament to the skill, precision, and courage her father had inherited and now feared would shape her life. The card remained on the table, untouched but heavy with possibility. Claire's eyes lingered. On it, in the distance, a single bird called. The colonel stood behind her, silent, offering his presence as both shield and witness. Whatever choice she made, whatever path she walked, he would not abandon her. Because sometimes, survival wasn't about bullets or battles. It was about standing together when the world demanded impossible courage and facing destiny head-on. Claire picked up the card. The dawn of decision had arrived.